Hello, everyone. It's great to see you. This is Kelly and Sandra. Good evening. And we are here for TEL 703 discussion 8. We are going to be looking at prompt number 2 in this evening. And it says, you'll be turning in the first draft of your review of scholarly and practitioner knowledge information informing the study at the end of module 9. And so here are some questions for us to think about as we are looking at completing that. Share with your group members how you're organizing the sections of your draft. How are you deciding what theories and research studies you will write about? How are you deciding in what order to present your ideas? What questions, concerns, wonderings, and uncertainties do you have related to writing this section of your action research paper? And then we can work to, as we ask one another questions, to help answer any of those questions, wonderings, or uncertainties. So I will start out. I do have a very rough draft that I have outlined, and I will tell you that for the most part, I followed the outline that was provided to us in Canvas. I would say that I, kind of maybe went away a little bit from one of the learning theories. So basically the way that I've structured it, as a reminder, my problem of practice is in one sentence to advance flourishing practices among leaders in academic medicine to reduce burnout. And so what I really did was in my introduction section, again, just did sort of a brief reminder of here's the problem of practice, here's what I'm hoping to accomplish. And then the very first concept that I decided to really outline was what is flourishing and how is flourishing defined and what does it look like? So not necessarily a learning theory like we've been studying, but really felt that anchoring people in what was meant by flourishing and the various definitions and theorists that are studying it and how it is becoming a theory unto its own was where I wanted to start and really kind of anchor things. I do talk a little bit about Bandura and social cognitive theory and some things like that. I weave it in, but not necessarily as a concept all on its own that I unpack. And then, my part of my intervention is really this idea that I would do this in a community of practice type setting where I would introduce these positive psychology interventions. And so then that's really my second is that I'm just going through, what is the theory behind community of practice? So that's really the one theory that I'm leaning into. And then I'm going to look at some implications. I will tell you that I've jotted down some others that I think like shared social regulation and some different things like that I think could be helpful. But I think for this first draft, that's where I'm going to kind of stick in terms of just trying to stay really centered towards the big
Yeah.
topics that inform it.
I think that's like I met with Dr. Smith, I think it was early last week, and it was this concept of like how many theories, because every time I read a theory for class, I can think to myself like, I can see how that, some
Yeah.
definitely nothing. And then some I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And I was just going through the knowledge building slides again, just to, get a sense of what. And so one way that I had thought about organizing, I have not written mine. It's going to be written. But one of the things that I had started thinking about was like maybe I need a theory or like a guiding concept, like your idea about the flourishing notion, for the problem, one for like one for the problem, one for, in my case, my pop has to do with contextualizing a student learning a first year college seminar course with change making to improve overall performance. So I thought, okay, I have theories around why students leave college early, which is pretty straightforward. One of those theories leads to my thinking about how I want to contextualize and redesign the course. So I thought that would be the best one of the ones. And then this idea of when I think about the course itself, so I found a well-known practitioner scholar in community college retention. Her name is her last name is Karp, and she put out this paper not long ago that I found when we were doing Dr. Wynn's class. It's teaching and learning for application model. It's an actual model. So it's kind of like the flourishing
Yeah,
thing where, Kamara, it's not like a cooked and set in stone and 20 years behind it kind of notion,
yeah,
but it's pretty fresh. It's pretty, but it's right. What she's saying is, let's teach students how to learn something to then learn how to apply something. It's very nuanced. But I just felt like that's exactly how I would want to set up this contextualized course. So that could be a second one. And then I have a bunch of just like hanging chads. They're kind of like all over the
yeah,
place. I could do social learning theory
yeah,
and self-efficacy. I thought about emotions and learning, which was one of the slides, which was the slide that I had put up. The fact that learning is an emotional process, right? And meaning that we learn and experience different kinds of emotions. Like we get super jazzed about what we're going to study, or we hate what we're going to study. We feel good when we accomplish something, or we feel awful when we don't. We get nervous and physiologically like disturbed when we're. So I thought
mhm,
maybe emotions, because when I think about why change making, that opens up a whole nother Pandora's box of opportunity, because there's so little written. And so the question I say to myself is, what makes you think that that's a good thing to do? And so I got to go. So and Dr. Smith said, like, don't go crazy with, like,
yeah,
I had said something like 4 to 5, and she said it's too many. Like, it's just, I
yeah.
mean, she's not going to stop anyone, but she had one for her theory, for her dissertation, and she's thinking, anywhere between 1 and 3 is enough. So I think I know what I want to write, at least for this chapter, like you said. But just organizing it seems like similar to yours. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, going into this, I probably was the same in that I had like 5 or 6 different things floating around. And I think as I sat down, I just kind of kept going back to that, like, don't boil the ocean. You don't have to write everything you've ever thought about.
Right.
It's like this is just enough to sort of get started. And when I think about where we're at in the process, it's almost like this feels like a really good test to say, like, okay, I'm going to advance this. How does this feel for me? Does this, and then get the feedback, and see how things fit.
Mhm. That makes sense.
Yeah, well, I appreciated listening to both of your perspectives on it, particularly Kamara, when you mentioned um, the organization of yours and how is flourishing defined? What is it? That kind of stood out to me because while I also have not like fully written mine, I feel like in terms of how I'm going to organize it, and just for my like in a sentence of like what my problem of practice is, it's how can effective educator professional development influence technology integration? Like that's my 1 sentence problem of practice. And so, first of all, I kind of pull out from that, which I've done intuitively in our first like action research and building that paper and all the different pieces of looking for different research and like our Ben's assignment that we did, which was like really
Yeah,
helpful initially, but then I've like built upon that and keep finding more things. Um, and it starts with that definition where it's like I say something like emerging technology integration, and it's like, well, what is that? What does that mean?
Right.
And like
Right.
all the
right.
research that I find related to that, and then effective educator PD. Well, what does that mean? And like looking through everything through that with research articles, in doing that, it led me to some theories and some theoretical frameworks. So TPAC is the one that primarily I am just like gung ho about. And it's this technology, pedagogy, and content knowledge. And it's this overlap that the framework states that, you can teach technology knowledge, you can teach pedagogical knowledge, and you can teach content knowledge. But the intersection where you're teaching all 3 of those is what TPAC is. And there's a lot of research out there, like a decent amount, when you just look for that, that points to innovations and programs, and it points a lot to, and TPAC itself is an instrument too, like it's a measurement tool. So I already have access to this like 65 question survey that I can like pull parts out that relates really specifically to where I am. So in terms of putting it together though, I think, yeah, making sure that there's, like you were talking about all the hanging chads, Sandra. So like making
Yeah,
sure that there's like not too much, because I am a rabbit hole person. I'll find something I get real excited about and then go down that rabbit hole. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like when I did Ben's, I remember, because it had to be like 20 articles or something. And I reached a point where I'm like, I've like read like everything that I think is relevant. But then as we've continued through these classes and something new opens up, Triple E framework was another one that I found, which, by the way, another assignment we did, that knowledge building Google Slides, that's been another part of this process for me, is going back to that. So like if I was like, what are all the different theories, rather than having to find one pop up in the research, I went back there and kind of like skimmed through, and I was like, which ones of these apply to me? And Triple E is sort of an offshoot of TPAC, where it's it's the same thing about effective technology integration, but it ties it more to student outcomes. So it's not just like, well, are you integrating the technology? It's like tying that to like what a student's outcomes are. But yeah, trying not to go into rabbit holes. So I kind of lumped TPAC and Triple E together as probably one of the theories. I know TPAC's going to be there for sure. And then experiential learning is the other one, because for me, and like, again, I think about my innovation already, even though we're at the like just supposed to be doing the review. It's hard for me not to think about it. I think because of my work context and because I'm already being asked to build things, which my intention is, of doing that. And it's very hands-on learning. So like the whole experiential learning piece of that is where I feel like I'm going to go. But yeah, that kind of covers most of the questions, I guess. But so Sandra, for you, I was wondering when you were talking about the things, and I was kind of writing down what you were saying about what you were like theories and stuff. And I thought about, Kamara's first statement about defining flourishing. Like, are you defining change making? Like, is that going to be part of?
Yeah, you guys are just making me think. So I don't, that's my biggest thing, is that I'm just really stuck, because it's not like there's this course is it's a 1 credit course. It's only 16 hours. So it's not like a 3 credit course. By the way, how much time are we at?
We've got like 3-ish minutes. I put a timer on.
So then this idea that like this course that I'm doing is contextualized, and it's not a change making introduction course. It's not like because it's not a discipline, right? So it's like, I don't know if I'm going to talk about a giant rabbit hole when I think about, again, those 4. No, the answer is, I thought for a second after Kamara and both of you spoke about you starting off with what is flourishing and what is, I can never always say it right, Kelly, whatever it is that you're calling it. But like your what if
technology integration or effective PD?
No, the technology integration part. So it's like this idea of what is change making, and then I can go into that, but I think that's too big, and that's gonna I feel like it's gonna sidetrack me into going into like what is change making, and then I find myself in these other side of the woods, and I'm like, wait, that's not. I'm not so much talking about all of change making, just elements of it or characteristics of it that I'm going to bring into the course. But it's equally important for me to talk about like this model of how to structure the course. The course has to be more interesting. It has to be more relevant. It has to be more direct. I'm just choosing change making as sort of like the content within which to do it, right?
Have you thought about like adult learning theory or the Meserow?
Maslov?
No, it's Jack Meserow. It's transformational learning theory. So
I've
like,
heard that one.
And so I just say it because like that's part of, I'm not studying those theories, but it's a part of effective PD, because PD and technology training it's adult training is what it is. It's not teaching for K-12 kids. It's teaching to adults. So that might
Sandra, I'm sorry. No, go ahead, Kelly.
I was just going to say that might be something interesting to look at if you really want to, if your study is about what is effective course design, which I know that that's not necessarily what it is, but like your question is, it's like retention, right, of students. Like, isn't that your ultimate, you want to?
Yeah, it's not so much effective course design, although that is an element if you think of pedagogy as part of course design, which it is, right? But it's really the content as well, like teaching them where the library isn't all they need to know in order to be successful during this very very tentative transformational phase. So it's both content and context. So
I think you've been drawn to emotional learning and some of those more emotional social theories for a reason, because as you've been looking at these kind of first generation students, you know, you believe that that's because there's this deeper context and pulling it back to your youth development background and things like that. So what I would just wonder is if for this first draft, if you just picked one of those learning theories and you just used that as your anchor to set up what you were going to do. And again, just almost try it on for size and sort of let the rest of it just fall by the wayside for a bit and let yourself get centered on like why that audience and why this approach and how that learning theory informs that. I think that might help you. And if later it unpacks something else for you, you know, great. But otherwise, yeah, we could all come up with like 20 theories that support what it is we're doing.
I appreciate that. Both of you guys helped me a lot right now. So I think, yeah, and that's the other thing is to keep this scope for this chapter 2 draft. It's 5 to 7 pages. It's not meant to like you said, it's not boiling the ocean. It is not chapter 2 of the real dissertation. It's just, I'm like, okay, breathe. Okay, take 2 and try it on for size, and then let's see how it goes.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, we are at our time. So thank you both so much for sharing about how this process has gone for you. And I hope those of you that are watching, you got to see a little bit of what we're going through, and hopefully it will help you too. So I hope you all have a wonderful evening. Thanks, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.